Hey folks, and happy Friday. Hope you've had a nice week so far. Welcome to Forecasting Space with me, your host Chase Wilson, the weekly show where we take a look at all things space from the last 7 days of space news and the upcoming 7 days. As far as launches from the continental United States are concerned, the last 7 days have been very interesting as far as domestic space flight, especially down in Boca Chica. We'll discuss that more in just a moment. First, let's take a look at what we can expect from the next week from launches here in the U.S. First things first, New Shepard is launching at 8:30 tomorrow morning. A few crew members will be going up on a suborbital launch. There's space tourists that will be up there for about 5 to 7 minutes in zero gravity. We'll be able to see above the Kármán line, and then we'll come back and land safely there on the space tourist vehicle New Shepard. This is NS-33, the 33rd launch of New Shepard. That is a reusable booster, so the first stage booster will come back and land safely at the launch site there in the West Texas desert, and of course the crew will come back by parachute safely. Next up, also tomorrow at 4:19 p.m., we'll see Transporter 14 launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base. That'll be launching multiple small satellites as opposed to one dedicated satellite. That way, each provider of those satellites can split the cost between them so that they don't each have to pay the full price of an individual launch for each one of them. As a result of this light payload, first stage of the Falcon 9 can actually land back at LZ-4, and it will be doing so. Don't really get to see a lot of those launches that return to the land too often. We usually see the drone ships, so that'll be a nice little treat there. That is going to be launching out of Vandenberg Space Force Base, again at 4:19 p.m. On Sunday at 12:47 a.m., we'll see Starlink Group 10-23 launching from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That'll be landing on a drone ship as is usual. And then very shortly after, in fact, this will be coming out of Kennedy at 2:42 a.m. on Sunday. We'll be seeing Axiom Mission 4. That'll be landing back on LZ-1 with a splashdown of the crew. This is actually the fourth private crew rotation to the International Space Station aboard the Crew Dragon spacecraft. So we're going to have some pretty interesting few days coming up here as far as manned space flight from the United States is concerned. If you've been a space nerd for any amount of time, our old friend, the Atlas V, well, that's coming back. 551 variant, in fact, the heaviest version of the Atlas V will be back Monday at 5:54 a.m. for the Project Kuiper mission by Amazon. This is kind of like Starlink in a lot of ways. This is the second launch of Kuiper. You know what? It'll just be nice to see a ULA rocket launching, especially one that's going extinct, such as the Atlas V, which is being replaced by the Vulcan. So it's been a long time, but I definitely have missed seeing our old friend with the 5 boosters launching back up into space. After that, on Wednesday at 12:32 a.m., we have a launch of another Starlink Group 10-34, launching out of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This will be landing on the autonomous spaceport drone ship off the coast as well. That concludes the launches from the United States over the next 7 days. Now let's take a look at some news over the last week, and I think the biggest news so far anyways from the last 7 days has to be what happened to Ship 36 down at Boca Chica at the Massey Test Facility. And let me tell you, it was a bit of a shocker. Sure enough, Ship 36 is the story of the week during a static fire campaign. It went kaput. Sure enough, it is gone. A deflagration. Some would call it an explosion, though I don't think it was necessarily supersonic. Either way you want to put it, RUD, anomaly, however you want to say it, it's gone. There is no more Ship 36. Looks like the ship taking over will have to be for Launch 10 because I think this is going to set us back quite a bit. Fortunately, Elon and the SpaceX teams have likely identified the cause of this. It appears to be a COPV, which kind of harkened back to some launches in the past, right, that we've seen from Falcon 9. In fact, the only 2 Falcon 9 failures have been nitrogen COPV failures, or in a certain case, helium COPV failures. So this is definitely one of those common causes of failures in rockets, which is a good thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's an endemic issue. That is to say, it is not native to Starship version 2, although this does kind of carry some weight to the myth that perhaps Starship version 2 is perhaps a little bit cursed, right? They might just want to move on to version 3, but I digress from my opinion giving. Nevertheless, this is a huge setback for the flight campaign for Flight 10, which was originally scheduled for perhaps somewhere towards the end of this month or early June, though clearly we're going to need that next ship to get its engines on and going through a test campaign due to the fact that, well, clearly there is no more Ship 36. Now, the booster has already gone through its testing, and all things considered, it went all right. I don't think there are any major issues that SpaceX are working with that. Clearly, right now, our setback is with the ship, and this is just one in the several strings of failures because the last one, of course, went into an uncontrolled roll into its flight in orbit. The one before that, of course, there were some issues there with the engines, right, falling off, exploding on the second stage. Like I said, nevertheless, I think version 2 might just be a little bit cursed. Well, I would certainly say we have faith in our SpaceX friends to get that sorted out and fixed in due time. With that out of the way, let's take a look at a photo of the week. This one is one of my favorites, taking a look at a black hole many, many millions of light years away. This one's a classic at this point, taken 8 years ago in 2017 by the Event Horizon Telescope, the black hole at the center of Messier 87. And I just like coming back to this one every now and then just because of how incredible it was that we got this to begin with. If you don't know about the Event Horizon Telescope, well, it's not exactly a telescope in the typical sense. It is actually a vast array stretched all across the Earth of radio telescopes, all pointed in the same direction. And you can do some interesting physical tricks to actually effectively get a resolution from a telescope the size of the Earth by combining the signals from these radio telescopes. And these radio telescopes have a special place in my heart due to the fact that I work very closely with radio signals myself as a radar technician here at Tennessee Valley Weather. So this is just one of those more remarkable things that really kind of reminds you that, hey, radio waves are light too. Just because we can't see them does not mean they are not in the light spectrum. Of course, that is true. Very, very small waves, but they're waves of light. Nonetheless, it's very remarkable that we can see this. This would be smaller than a grain of sand held up at arm's length in the sky, a very, very tiny object for us to see from Earth, but we did it nevertheless. And just as a little fun side note too, we also saw the black hole at the center of our own Milky Way, which is much closer. The Messier 87 black hole is 55 million light years away, but we're only about 20,000 light years away from the center of our galaxy. However, the black hole in M87 is much larger, so it was a little bit easier to see that, but still, it is remarkable that we can see both of them at all, proving that black holes are real. If you didn't know that, it was actually only speculation and mathematical conjecture up until this confirmation. Well, that concludes this episode of Forecasting Space with me, your host, Chase Wilson. Thanks for joining me this week. Be sure to tune in next week as we see what unfolds in the space sector.